and all the other genders that have been the result of complications resulting from when you were born. It's interesting, we just had a talk about the complications of all these various forms of corneal and lenticular procedures. But we have to get it into balance. How many of you brushed your teeth this morning when you woke up? Put your hands up. Brush your teeth. Almost everybody brushed their teeth. You know when they brushed their teeth, what they did? They created trauma in their mouths. They forced entry with a synthetic brush into their mouths. The number of complications you created by just simply brushing your teeth, the dentists would say, this is terrible. You should do your teeth the way I tell you. The same goes with birth. If you look at the complications that occur with just the act of being born, if we were so concerned about that, none of us would ever have been born in the first place. But we are all here. So even though we have complications with all these forms of surgery, we have to live with them, but the main thing is managing them appropriately. But there are certain things that happen that you cannot manage that simply. And that's what I'm going to refer to in this talk as titled over here. And I want to make a comment concerning my fellow colleagues that I work with, resulting in this particular presentation. When it comes to presbyopic corrections, as time goes on, patients get older, people become older, their incidence of hyperopia will increase, as well as their presbyopia and their astigmatism. So especially for some newer members in this group and in the audience, when you are tackling these patients with these conditions, remember, as you treat them, as time goes on, their hyperopia is likely to increase because the eye, as Antonio mentioned before, presbyopia, etc., these are not static conditions, these are dynamic. So things will change as time goes on. But the interesting thing is that hyperopia certainly increases and becomes the dominant feature, especially in the 75 plus age group. So between these two age groups, when patients have procedures such as Presbyopic Lasik, Presbyopic, all these various techniques, as they have those treatments in this particular age group, say 40 to 50, their life expectancy is now into their 80s. So even though you make these procedures, you have to let the patients know your hyperopia is going to increase. You will need an enhancement procedure in the future. You may need to wear glasses, just occasionally, just to augment the correction that was performed when the patient was younger. Now, one thing that Klaes Didsen did, which was quite pioneering, he's done a lot of things that were pioneering, but he was one of the first people to actually make corrections for hyperopia using external lasers. And in the early days, it was noted that especially for hyperopic cases, there was less predictable, and at that time there was more regression. Meaning, you are +3, you made a correction, you improve, and gradually your hyperopia will increase. Why? Because you are starting to get that a little bit older. What we wanted to know is that if these patients who are hyperopic, and most likely presbyopic too, when they are corrected, how good is the correction? Klaes mentioned is the predictability. But if you look at some of the literature, when it concerns predictability using the spherical equivalent refractive error, predictability can vary depending on the time after procedures. And in one particular publication, in hyperopic cases, there's a tendency towards myopia after 2 years, which is not confirmed by other studies. The point is that the age groups in these different studies may well be influencing the final outcomes, as pointed out in these three studies I mentioned here. One thing Richard Lindstrom said almost 20 years ago: if you are going to perform treatments for hyperopic cases, if they are young patients, overcluster, overcorrect, don't undercorrect, overcorrect. Right? Why do you usually say overcorrect younger patients? Because they tended to regress. The older patients didn't tend to regress. Actually, the older patients tended towards myopic overcorrection. The cornea in an older person is different. In an older cornea, the collagen structure, the diameter, the spaces between collagen fibrils, and as most of you who are corneal doctors will know, older corneas are stiffer and drier. Because they are stiffer, because they are drier, their refractive index is higher. The only thing you can say, when the rest of your body, as you get older, becomes softer and flabby, would you agree, Kiki? The one part of you that will become stiffer is your cornea. The rest of you, your body will become flabby, but your cornea will become stiffer. Because of the stiffness, could this actually explain why we have these variations between the younger tending towards undercorrection, older tending towards overcorrection? We know this occurs in myopic patients. Does the same occur in hyperopia? Well, it does, and it's in a subtle way. This just summarizes this particular study when it was conducted over 1 week, 1, 3, up to 12 months postop, and gives you a figuring of the two groups of patients. Group 1, patients who were over the age of 40. Group 2, Group 1, patients who were up to over the age of 40. Group 2, patients who were between 18 and 40 years of age. So this summarizes the two groups. One group which was around about 51 years of age average, another group which was 20 years younger. So we're comparing these two groups using these particular techniques. This is the post-operative results. This is the typical kind of data and graphs you will see in the publications. If you look at journals like JRS, they have a standard procedure of how data should be presented. And when you present data in a very simple way like this, mean sphere over a post-operative period, mean cylinder over a post-operative period, of course, things change, but if you compare these two groups of patients, the young and the elderly, at each time, we actually find there is no difference between the young and the older groups at each stage post-op. So if you look at the data in your own clinics, the way I've shown here, you will conclude, you know what? It doesn't matter about the patient's age, because the young and the older groups, there is no difference between them. But that's because of the way you interpreted the data. If you look at the data in a slightly different way, maybe you will have a different result. As people like Kiki and I do, when I look in the mirror, I do not see a bald guy. Honestly, I do not see a guy who's got hair that's missing. But the truth is, I'm looking at myself the wrong way. The same with this data. Let's look at this data in a slightly different way. And what we will find, that if we start behaving the way artists do. Are you familiar with the work of M.C. Escher? Of course you are. Why are you familiar with M.C. Escher? Because you are European, and so was Escher. Escher looked at things in a very, very different way and interpreted the world in a different way. Let's interpret your data in a different way and see what happens. When you do that, you do find significant trends relating to age and outcomes after hyperopic treatment. The best cycle equivalent at 12 months is related to patient age, but it's a subtle relationship and it involves the logarithm of patient's age. That's the connection between the outcomes of hyperopic treatment and presbyopic treatment and patient age. When it concerns just the spherical corrections, we have the same. Just as here at 12 months, there is a logarithmic relationship between the outcomes of refractive surgery, in this case Lasik, patient's age, in relation to the outcomes at 1 year postop. The same occurs when we look at the astigmatism cylinder at 12 months. Again, there's this very subtle logarithmic relationship between outcomes and patient age. So what I'm saying to you is that when you look at the results of whether it might be ICLs or any other technique involving especially the cornea, look at the data you have in relation to patient's age. Look at some permutations, because you might find some subtle differences which you can use to then explain to your patients why you're getting the results that you are achieving. So, the question was, does age influence the outcome of Lasik in hyperopic presbyopic patients? The answer is yes. Why? Because the cornea changes with age. As we get older, we don't want to look like this, according to the advertisements. But the truth is, we do change as we get older. We don't hear as well. Our skin is not so good. This is why your outcomes of your corneal procedures will change with age as well. Thank you very much for your attention.